and I'm developing a non-profit 400 acres biodiversity park near Hyderabad. So does it excite you to set up a hotel there?
Yeah. We'll take one more. Yeah, you, ma'am. Then to you, sir.
Hi, I'm Sudha, and my question is to all the CSOs on the panel and also in this room, is how much of what you're doing is driven by a necessity to comply with changing regulations across the world, rather than actual, because you believe that the planet is going to implode at a certain point. And the second thing would be for Mr. Acharya is that I'm a British citizen, so I've been reading stories about Port Talbot and what is happening with the steel plants there. When you change to greener technology and you're going to definitely lose employees, do you have a strategy? What are you all thinking? What is going to happen? I think the biggest challenge I see is where are all these people going to go? What are they going to work? What is going to happen? So who's thinking about them? Yeah.
Thank you. You, sir. Here, a mic here, please. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Sandeep from Ministry of Arts Sciences. My question is to Ms. Inge and maybe partially to Mr. Acharya. The science is very dynamic and so is the technology. So it's the evolution of the science and technology together achieving the sustainability is sometimes become expensive for achieving the sustainability for you and accommodate your business tactics. So how do you find this challenge towards achieving the sustainability in accommodating the dynamicity of the science and the technology?
Thank you. Over to you, please. Yeah.
Yes, okay, so it's about the financing, correct, if I understand your question? First, the hotel, yeah, okay. Thank you very much for those questions. So first about the hotel, I think absolutely, I'm not the developer, but I have a direct line to our developers. So I think if you're talking about developing hotels in a community or in a biodiversity-rich environment, we have to do it right. So we are doing resorts, for example. We have 130 resorts around the world. And every time we are doing this in an environment that is rich in biodiversity, we take that into account. We are doing this in Africa. We are doing this in the island nations where we develop. And that has to be part also of the design of the property, of the way the property, for example, works with getting fresh water, works with renewables on site, and also invests in the biodiversity on site with biodiversity restoration. We are, for example, also a signatory to the principles for nature-based tourism that the WTTC has issued across the sector. So that's also an example of collaboration. So I think we need to do this, we can do it, and we need to do it right. I also want to talk maybe about the financing that the question was from the other gentleman. Financing is key, of course, if we need to step up the scale of these developments, of the technology that we need. But there is also a misconception, and you refer to it in your introduction, is that, for example, the design of green buildings is expensive. Well, actually, it isn't. If you design it in from the start, it can actually be at the same cost of a regular building or less expensive. So that is one of the things that are the misconception. For example, many of the investments that we need in green buildings, the electrification through heat pumps, as an example, those have paybacks of less than 5 years, specifically in India. So we can actually move, for example, gas boilers to heat pumps in a very cost-effective way. Now, the other thing is that from development banks like the IFC, the World Bank, but also from some India banks, you have green bonds. But for our sector, the ticket sizes of these green bonds are too big. I was talking about the many SMEs we have in our network, And actually, very often, the minimum ticket sizes to get those green bonds for our asset owners, they are too big. So that is one of the things which from the tourism sector would be a call to the government and to the development banks and the banks that are involved in this. Please make it adjusted to the sectors where you have big networks of SMEs. And maybe one final point I want to make. It's been a question out and about here about demand, and we have talked about creating the demand for sustainable solutions. And actually, if you look at hotels, for example, Radisson, we touch 5 million customers every year. So talk about creating that sustainability consciousness, we have an opportunity. And we try to make it easy to stay green. And we do that to B2C and B2B, because it's very important to influence how people think, how they consume, and how they are part of the solution and part of driving that revenue to sustainable solutions. So we make it easy in meetings by offering 100% carbon compensated meetings in all our events around the world. And we also do that through collaboration in the hotel industry, where we have defined an entry-level sustainable stamp called Hotel Sustainability Basics, which is actually verified by third parties, so it can be trusted by consumers. So also on that demand side, we see that it creates the pull that we need to then generate the drive for net zero and the investments in net zero in our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me quickly answer the questions posed. First to your questions, some examples how we look at sustainability and opportunity besides renewable energy. The first example I can tell that most of the waste which comes from iron making, which is called slag, which used to be wasted, now we sell it to make it cement. So that's one example. And by the way, that is how JSW cement is the greenest cement in the world. We have less than 200 kg per ton of, CO2 emission per ton of cement, while the world average is 650, right? That's. The second example, carbon itself as asset. I told we are running a 100 TPD carbon capture utilization project. We are selling it for beverage applications, right? We are looking how we can use the carbon cycle and use that as a product and recirculate even in the process. That's the second example. Third example, we use a lot of waste. Like for example, we convert it to manufactured sand and sell it, right? That replaces natural sand, environmentally good, but we also generate revenue, right? We get a lot of waste gases, and that we use both gases and pressure, waste pressure. We convert it to energy, and almost 40% of my energy need comes from these waste gases and energy. We are also estimating if I can capture all the gases which is from 70 degree to 200 degree, which are unable technically right now, I can save at least 1 crore per factory a day, right? That's the impact. Third example I'll tell, I talked about change management, people change management we called SEED program, which by the way got rewarded as the change maker in the COP28. We saved last year 500 crore by that project. Not only we reduced emissions, we saved money, because this is all about efficiency improvement. So I can give a lot of examples. Coming to your second question, are we open to make collaboration with startup? Of course, we do startup horizon scanning always. We look for those disruptive technology to come up, and we are open and we are working. Besides with the educational institute, we look for those startups to come out because I believe they are the future solutions. Now coming back to your question quickly, I think you have put two questions. The first question I'll answer as a CSO, how my time should go and how it is going. See, for that you need to understand how the business runs. And my philosophy, business run in 3 factors: greed, fear, recognition. These are the 3 factors which drives business. So making money always drives business faster. So as a Chief Sustainability Officer, if I can help in driving the business strategy to find opportunity, that is where I spend a lot of time to talk to all the senior CXO level CEOs, and my job is to work with CEOs to find opportunity to adjust the business model for the transformation. That's important. The next point you talked about fear, that is compliance. Anyway, we have to do. I mean, I don't see that's a rocket science. Last point, we should look good. At this end, I know at the end I get recognition, CII gives me a recognition, that's good. I feel good. So this is in that order actually business runs. So therefore, as a CSO, we need to adjust this philosophy to drive strategies. On the just transition which you talked about, the Port Talbot, which Tata Steel is facing. See, in India, we are in an advantage position in the sense our steel sector is growing. So we are putting a lot of transition technology. In fact, day before yesterday on the Vishwakarma Puja, we inaugurated the largest blast furnace in the world, right? By putting that, we believe that is a transition technology which will not only reduce the cost, but it will make a lot of people employment. Even in the electric transition, if it happens, I'm already running 30% of my productions through electric routes. So we believe we'll continue to generate employment rather than losing people. We are looking for people. And second thing, we are consciously looking for skill upgradement. That's our process. If Kokobon becomes obsolete after 20 years, we'll absorb them in somewhere else. If you look at the group, we are growing from nowhere 25 years before, we are a $24 billion group. So we are looking at mobility. JSWMG motor, we are looking at EV transportations. So we are looking at various cleaner sectors of businesses. So there is a good opportunity, and what I can assure you, we are consciously doing that to take care of our people, right? Coming to your last question, I think Inge has already responded to you, but there will be always elements of technology and finances. I always call there is 3 types of technological move it happens. One, technology which is currently financially viable. No brainer, everybody must use. And I always get surprised when people do not use those technologies which are financially viable. But they must use. Second bucket, technology which is proven, but they are not financially viable. Believe it, we need to work on that because we have to make this financially viable. We have seen many examples, whether it is semiconductor sector, whether it is a renewable sector, any sector you say, it is going to happen. We need little bit of push, and that is why I am a proponent of viability gap funding to make that happen. The third kind of technology, startups, they need handholding, they need ecosystem because they are the future. So we need to look at that. So we need to look at these 3 buckets and do the collaboration rightly. Thank you.
Thank you. Some last words from you, James.
Well, I'm going to run an experiment again to end it because much as we talk about corporate, my area is to make it very personal, and both the CSOs here talked about demand side. So let me ask you a question. If I said that if you paid 500 rupees a month for the next 8 years, you can be net zero for the rest of your life. 500 rupees a month, 500, that's it. For the next 8 years, you can be net zero for the rest of your life. How many would do that? Okay, see, interesting, not all. What if I told you that number was 2,200? Fewer hands. I think this idea that it is going to cost, but there is a point at which we are willing to bear the brunt that is needed for the change is incredibly important. One of the things we've discovered in our work is the cost is actually minimal. The number is actually less than 500. That's the real number. And imagine that, right? For a small step, we could make a big difference.
Thank you. On that positive note, we close this session. Thank you for a very illuminating session. We will not have a break. We will start the next session immediately, please. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, with this we come to an end of this insightful session. Our sincere gratitude goes out to the distinguished panel members and the moderator for making this an extremely insightful discussion. We'll now start with our next session, Harmonizing National and Global ESG Framework. As ESG standards and compliances are rapidly evolving both in India and globally, organizations are unlocking growth opportunities by aligning with various global frameworks. The panel discussion will explore the challenges and best practices in ESG reporting, suggestions on harmonizing framework, and overall how this can support sustainable finance and responsible investing. Let's dive into these critical insights and welcome our esteemed panel members and our moderator, Mr. Shikhar Jain, Executive Director, CII ITC Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development, on the dais. I'll also request all the panel members to please come on the dais. I will now request Mr. Shikhar Jain to please take the lead and commence the discussion.
So good morning, all of you. I think we had a very wonderful first session, and I think the energy levels are quite high. That's what I am seeing. So on the 19th Sustainability Summit, the key theme that we are driving this year from CII perspective is driving change for a sustainable or sustainability conscious world. And I think what in the inaugural address Seema said, that now in India, we are at a time where we are demonstrating what are the global trends that we can showcase from India. So just giving a bit of the brief and then the context part is, I remember that in 1999, when we started in CII working on disclosures, that was the first time that we heard about an institution called GRI. And they were the first one to come and say that this is how it works and all. And we were not so sure about it, to be honest. But came 2003, we saw that the demand is picking up. Those companies which have an exposure to the global markets, they are going into disclosures, reporting, and fast tracking. Because from 1999 to now, when we are in 2024, I see that the complete roadmap of sustainability journey, which started with just mere disclosure, today has reached somewhere where I, as a practitioner for last 30 years, say is that it cannot be coined as non-financial. So my one thing is that please do not qualify ESG or sustainability as non-financial. It was one of the biggest mistakes that we have done worldwide, globally, is calling it as non-financial. And the better word for that would be essential. So I have started saying that sustainability, ESG journey or roadmap of an organization is not only mere disclosures now. Today when we see the exposure of ESG, it is going into investments, it is going into a business model, and the G part, which is the most core, is how do you align with your mainstream business. And when today we are talking to SEBI, which is the market regulator, introducing BRSR core, and they are almost competing with one of the best models in the world, where we are trying to build the interoperability with IFRS S1, S2. So that's the maturity that Indian companies have showcased, that how we can take this journey of ESG. And there also we are seeing that this is something which is very essential, because the impact of this essential part leads into the financial part. So the moment we say it is non-financial, it took us 10-15 years to first convince some of my panelists also who are from the financial fraternity. And today, the one who are driving sustainability ESG are more from the financial fraternity because they find a value in it. So I think gone is that debate that, okay, climate is important, ESG is important. now coming up is the nature is also equally important, which we have tried to cover in the sessions. So I think where we have gone from disclosure is investments now, and in this session we have the experience, I should say, and the versatility of the panelists, whom I am just going to introduce. So there are three things, what I say in ESG today, and we are doing it under the title of Harmonizing National and Global ESG Frameworks. So there is a lot happening across the world. All of you know, we started from GRI, now there is something called as TCFD, TNFD, IFRS, S1, S2, and mind it, last year when we did B20 and G20 was India's presidency, it was a very huge learning for us. It was the first time we were driving the global organizations as the business entities and also the governments. And we saw that most of them are looking India for solutions. And here we were thinking that we are sort of giving solutions to, or we are looking them for solutions, but it is other way around. Today they are looking for us for solutions, because one thing that global fraternity has realized about India is that what works in India works everywhere. And I'm not going into the other geographies, +1, +2 sort of things, but that's where we are. And this is what we need to learn from our panelists today, which comes from very diverse background. And I think I was talking with some of my panelists and other speakers that what CII brings to this particular summit is the content. And that content, I respect all of you who are over here, and it's a house full. And I've been said by my secretariat that there is a live streaming also going in the next hall. So if some of you don't feel comfortable, please be comfort over there and do learn on the content part. And I think that's what brings all of us over here. And one thing in the previous session that also I have learned, and in this session also we will try to bring in, is what this summit also tries to bring in with the questions that you ask is that we also take that to the policy guys, to the regulators, that how they need to look into this particular thing. So let me introduce me to the panel, because this is very important panel. We have with us Mr. Bhomik at the extreme left, who is the Managing Director and the Chief Analytical Officer of India Ratings and Research Fitch Company. And good Mr. Bhomik, you have made in time. Means, sorry for keeping you at the extreme left. I thought that he will be delayed, but I think today luck is on our side. And particularly, we will learn from him when the ESG landscape came in India in around 2017, and then it got sort of very much matured during the COVID times, and then everybody sort of got misled that whether it is sustainability or ESG and the world. But one thing during COVID, FY20, FY21, what I saw was that ratings all of a sudden became one of the major drivers of companies adopting ESG, so which started from disclosures, identifying materiality and all. But so we'll have experience of Mr. Bhomik with us. Then we have with us on my immediate left Mr. Manish Kumar, who is head ESG and CSR for ICICI Bank Limited. And I've been talking to him for last couple of months on the BRSR core work that we are doing along with the Industry Standards Forum of SEBI, and realized that a lot of experience that he brings in, because as I said, he's a chartered accountant by profession. So these guys, when they start heading ESG and CSR, so we have not to present a business case, but they are there for the business. So it's very much aligned part of our business model, and I think that's what the role I am seeing. Prabodha said about the role of CSO, but I am seeing that all your chief risk officer, upcoming chief financial officers, I think that's what sustainability is driving in. Then we have on my extreme right Mr. Vignesh Chandrasekhar. He is also a chief financial officer and sustainability leader at Synthite Industries. What I learned from him was that a unique business company, again he is from the financial background, and the driver is the global value chain, because they are into the value chain of some of the big brands. They also have operations abroad, and I was learning from him that how ESG is getting embedded into the supply chain side. We'll learn more about it, but we have a dedicated session on the supply chain, so we will leave those questions at that time. But here we are looking more on the harmonization of the standards. So we will learn from each of the panelists how this can be harmonized. Then on my immediate right is Ms. Anjali Kumar. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Zomato. And in my interaction with her, I learned that she used a very good word, saying that we are a very young listed company. So the norms, all of a sudden when you are listed, you are young, you are a startup, the norms are same. So you are a company which is 100 years old, 50 years old, but when you are in the market space, this is the norms that guide. So you will be compared with amongst best in class, best in world, and I think that's the challenge, and we will learn from her how this young company looks at harmonization of the standards. And then we also have a very important person, Dr. Ashok Menon. He is the Director Sustainability Asia Pacific for SABIC. And that's where I said that what works in India works in other countries also, and we have been learning from him that what are the models that SABIC is looking into its business operation. In my interaction, he sort of brought out that this harmonization also looks into many private standards which are sprouting across the world. So we are so confused lot that what we need to do, what we need not to do. So I think this is what the great panel over here is, and my time from 1 hour is reduced to 45 minutes because previous panel was equally sort of giving you more solutions, I should say. So we'll try to do some justice with time, still interact with all of you as audience who have come to hear out the experts. So I will start with you, Mr. Bhaumek, coming from the background of the ratings, that how do we look into this particular world where we have to harmonize the national and the global ESG frameworks. One example that I learned from you was how you have sort of inbuilt ESG into your credit rating schemes itself, and what are your suggestions of harmonization both at the domestic level and also at the international level. So over to you, please.
Thank you. A very interesting topic, very timely topic. I'll try and give an outside-in perspective to all of you issuers who deliver the product. So as people who appraise market participants who look at various companies and try and assess what is the risk or opportunities depending upon whether you're on equity or on debt, there are a few tenets, a few principles that all of us follow. One is consistency. And that is important because you don't want shocks, you don't want surprises. It's a bit like your employees or your companies expect you to continue to perform in a robust manner based on certain principles and values, and that is expected. People don't want surprises in terms of mostly negative, either on the upside either in terms of something which people didn't. So from a market perspective, consistency of performance is one of the more fundamental pillars. And that obviously is something where the whole discussion around climate, around how people are treated inside and outside the system, and how the entire governance framework works to put all of this together is very critical. Because if there are certain deficiencies in the whole fundamental premise of how the company works, it could be a solid company in an excellent market with excellent margins, but if a shock comes in terms of unexpected results, people resigning, key people, company not able to attract skills, not able to retain its key people, then obviously investors would wonder, is the business model sustainable? The product is great, the company's brand is fine, but will it exist a couple of years down the line? And this is a question that is getting asked across the spectrum, and the debate has been widened. In effect, the debate has been widened to be mindful about the impact that our product has not just on customers, which is the basic premise that we've been following over the last 200 years, whether people will buy my product, but also whether the product is something that the customers will continue to use. In the sense, it may be very popular today, but will it remain relevant 5 years, 10 years down the line? And the reason why that is relevant is because investors and debt holders may have a longer, or usually have a longer time horizon. So either the company has the ability and has demonstrated its ability to constantly adapt to changing markets, and or ideally, that's the best possible scenario, the company has something, has the necessary process and has a product which will stay relevant for a long time. And in that whole relevance discussion, apart from consistency, the second point becomes relevance, obviously. The discussion around, as I said, climate, people, and governance has been added. And rightly so, because in the past we have seen companies stumbling because of pollution or effluence or local protests against the companies saying that, this is damaging our life, our way of living, etc. And then it becomes a distraction for investors and for rating agencies to understand what is the final outcome of this. We've also seen where disclosures have not been timely, etc. And so therefore investors are always willing to pay a premium for consistency and reliability, and that's a given. So in that context, I think the bigger discussion around harmonization is very relevant, because it's a relatively new topic. I mean, new in the sense it's been being discussed for the last 20 years. However, the principles are evolving in the sense, the broad principles we all agree and understand. We know from a climate perspective, what the end goals are, what we want to achieve. Various countries, including India, have set a carbon neutral target. And are now, the point is, this also involves a lot of changing technology. The whole coal-fired industrial revolution, 250 years old, is now moving on to something which is probably going to be more relevant, where we're going to use other natural resources to use. Now, this change of technology is happening as we speak, and there are investments happening all around the world. Those investments are changing. Some of those investments are very dynamic in nature. We're exploring options to fossil fuel. And so therefore, how this will evolve is not known. Some of these are still at a startup, at a concept stage. And so therefore, this process will evolve, and that's a given. The sooner issuers and companies adapt to this, and by adapting, I mean embracing in a manner which is expected by market participants. I think the standards, which standard to follow, etc., is a matter of detail, which I think we will continue to struggle with, because standards will also evolve. Earlier, the GRI and the TCFD that were mentioned were more principle-based, and now SASB and IFRS are now putting in more detailed requirements. The European, the sustainability products, the eco-design that they have brought up, will now look at various details that every product must be able to furnish. So these are details that, but the good practices that we see amongst companies that we rate are these companies that are successful and are highly rated and are global leaders, whether it be in the business of healthcare or in the business of metals or consumer products, have embraced this concept and are in our sense are adequately invested in people and processes that capture the data. And then the data capturing through the cycle is I think very critical, and are now more transparent in the way their annual reports are presenting this to investors. And I'm pretty sure that presentation will continue to evolve as investor requirements change. But I think the process has already been embraced. So somebody who sort of says that this is something I'm not comfortable with, I don't think can be the answer. Because it's something we have to grapple with and we have to get used to. And finally, I think and I was quite taken by the point that, the world is looking at us. I'm not surprised. because circularity is something, which is a very old concept that, in Indian ethos, and I don't want to sort of make this point, but all of us have grown up with the lesson that, what you do today, the result of that is something we will face either in this life or in the next. So the concept of circularity and to be very mindful of what our action has on people around us is a very old concept which we now, by the way, have also embraced in our core competencies and our values of different companies. So I think this is something for which India is absolutely ready and ready to embrace. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Bhaumek, and I think good to learn your closing part of the value-based sort of systems which get embedded into the business model through the governance mechanism and people following those ethos. We move quickly to Mr. Manish Kumar from ICICI Bank to give his thoughts, and you can focus more on harmonization, as we said, because you are coming from a banking fraternity. So there are domestic, the national level harmonization also which is required, which we have been discussing on other forums. And where do you see a global alignment coming up? And because you come from the financial fraternity, you can give more direction to the audience as well. So over to you, Manish.
Thank you very much. Good morning to the audience, and happy to see a house full. Befits the theme of today, driving consciousness in sustainability. And also this, is a reflection of how CII is leading, the industry to really participate. I thank CII for making me, part of today's panel discussion. I often get asked, why and how sustainability is relevant to banking. So I think the first thing that we need to be very clear in our minds is it is impacting all of us. The way we look at it is we have to look how climate change is impacting us in our operations. And of course, the previous panel spoke about it, and they also talked about solutions which they are adopting to really mitigate some of the impact and also look at solutions which can drive the change. Number two, we also have to drive sustainability through, our lending practices. So effectively, we are influencing action in our, borrower fraternity. For us, that is our value chain. The value chain that we talk about from an industrial perspective is both, vendors, they talk about dealers, but for us, the value chain is our borrowers. So effectively, that is how, we have to look at it from a banking and finance perspective. With regard to harmonization, which is the topic of the panel here, I think we need to step back and look at the origin of ESG, because the ESG framework is not something which is new. We have to look at how it evolved from the UN Sustainable Development Goals. From a financing perspective, the UNEP, principles of responsible investing, they adapted some of the UN SDGs, and they were driving some of the investment decisions, some of the actions towards responsible behavior and driving that sustainability action in the borrower fraternity. So that is effectively the origin. Then we came to the disclosure part, and Shikhar spoke about the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI. It effectively provided a framework through which companies could really disclose, what they were doing in the area of sustainability. And it is a simple, mantra that we are all fully aware of now today. What gets measured gets monitored, and what gets monitored is now getting disclosed, and disclosure will drive action. It will only raise the bar. Seema mentioned, in the morning session, how we need to raise the bar. I can completely relate to it. It resonates very well. 2 years ago, the way I used to see the discussions happening on sustainability, it was more about creating awareness. Today, we are talking about action. And again, the previous panel was full of that action orientation that we saw happening across, India that we see. One of the advantages that we have in India is we are able to come out with solutions in a frugal manner. That is how we are leading the action We are able to do it at a lower cost. We are able to do it with the help of the startup ecosystem at more efficient manner. We are fleet-footed from that perspective. And I think G20 presidency was a clear demonstration of how we can lead the pack and how we can really garner attention in this area. Talking about the regulatory framework that we have, if we look at it, more internally within India, at least from a banking and financial sector, we have two regulators, who are I would say, leading the journey that we have. One is the capital market regulator, SEBI, and I really admire SEBI to have taken that step, and some of the very firsts that they have done, not only in India, but globally. So one is we are aware of the business responsibility and sustainability reporting that has been made mandatory for the top 1,000 listed entities in the country. And if you look at the spectrum, there are about 145 parameters. They embrace E, S, and G. It's not that they have left out any aspect of E, S, and G, environmental, social, and governance. So the regulator is saying that all three are important in the sustainability journey. The parameters that they have picked up are very relevant, while the parameters are sector agnostic, but they actually cover the entire gamut of ESG, and that is where the harmonization comes in. It is actually based on the UNEP principles of responsible investing. So they have picked up from what is happening globally. They have looked at what is relevant from a disclosure perspective, and being a capital market regulator, they are looking at investor interest. They are looking at customer interest. That is how the entire BRSR framework has been developed. The other important regulator that we have is the Reserve Bank of India. Now, from a banking sector perspective and looking at it from a Reserve Bank of India lens, they are actually looking at how climate change can lead to risks in the business. They want financial institutions, lenders to evaluate that risk. They want to ensure that the banking industry is capable of absorbing that risk, mitigating that risk, and probably enabling the transition, to look at newer technologies, supporting the financing aspects or the requirements of the industry. Are they adequately capitalized? Do they have access to various capital? When we talk about catalytic capital, we talk about growth capital, we talk about transition capital, we talk about supportive capital. So does the financial sector really have access to that kind of a capital? So that is the lens through which the Reserve Bank of India is looking at it, and their primary focus is actually climate risk. So between the two regulators, if we look at it, the harmonization is missing. The reason being that they are looking at different objectives. They are addressing a different need, through which they have developed the regulation. But at some point in time, there is a task force in India at some point in time. I'm sure these regulations or the regulators will definitely converge. We are seeing that happening through the accounting guidelines which are coming in. The IFRS S1, S2, both the regulators have recognized that ultimately the impact of climate, the impact of the work that we are doing in the social sector, the impact of any shortcomings on the governance side, I think Anando mentioned about that. How does that lead to a risk? How does that lead to a financial impact? The financial impact could also be indirect, through a reputation risk. It can be through a litigation risk. So that is where the entire framework again gets harmonized. When we start looking at the financial impact, IFRS S2 specifically talks about the impact of climate change on each line item, whether it's on the balance sheet side or whether it is on the P&L side. Therefore, it is very important to look at it from that perspective. I believe in India, we have been used to regulations from time, immemorial, I would say. It's a different lens that we have to see. We already have those enablers in place. We are already doing, whatever we have, what is required under the ESG framework. It's only how do we look at it with a different lens. It's only how do we disclose and talk about it in a different manner. It's only how we can really raise the bar again, leading to action. So I think that more and more disclosures that we make will actually lead to better action. It will lead to driving the sustainability journey to what is required, from an external stakeholder perspective. Probably I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. And I think you have brought a very relevant point connecting both the domestic, the national and the global framework, where we have regulators like RBI, SEBI, and then we are also seeing the institutions like ICAI and all, which are into the standard setting. They also need to align this. So all the sort of the regulatory framework is speaking the same language. And I think that is what the challenge globally also is. So if we say that whether the securities market is aligning with IFRS, how they are doing it. So I think this is an evolving thing, and I think Mr. Bhaumik also said that this is evolving, and we can play a very large role from India, because this is what the examples are. Recently we have been discussing with earlier with TCFD and now with TNFD, where their frameworks we are trying to apply on Indian businesses. And I think we are all universally, there are 180 companies following that. But we are seeing that all are at the same pace. How do we connect it to the nature-related aspects, to the financial disclosures? I think that's what the real-time challenge is. And I think we have to participate into the global dialogue as well. That's what the clear sort of guidance is. We move now to Anjali with a young company that she is into the position of Chief Sustainability Officer. So let us know at Zomato, all of us means I don't want to market over here and raise the hand that how many of us are having the app, but it's something that most of the customers touch almost on the daily or a weekly basis. So how you are following the principles of sustainability, and where do you see this alignment coming in? Because you are dealing with investors, you are dealing with consumers, you are also dealing with a very big gig worker population. So how do you see these challenges emerging out? Over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having Zomato on this panel. And let me just set some context. First, a little bit about Zomato, which I'm hoping many of you use. So Zomato, of course, went public in 2021, FY22 effectively. And our mission is better food for more people. And we look at both what we do on the compliance side and in terms of disclosures, as well as on the voluntary side, as helping us achieve that mission. You should know that we serve about 20 million customers through a network of 500,000 delivery partners all over the country. These are active delivery partners. And we support a network of 250,000 plus restaurants, many of whom are micro enterprises, micro, medium, small enterprises, right? And we've been fortunate that despite just literally being 2 years old on the public markets, we've been, thanks to my team, many of whom are present here today, as well as a strong network of advisors, we've been really able to get on top of mandatory disclosures and have also received recognition from global rating agencies. We are AA rated on MSCI. We are also the only food delivery company globally to be marked as low risk by Sustainalytics. And these are no small achievements for a company that's operating in India, working with a very large set of gig workers, and many restaurants are informal enterprises. So I do consider it to be quite an achievement that we have gotten this far. And of course, one must thank the regulator for the push that BRSR has provided. And we are also of the belief that data definitely drives the agenda on sustainability. But let me now speak from the perspective of a young company, and maybe many in this room will be members of such companies, or perhaps even yet to start such companies, right? A bulk of India's industrialization, so to speak, has yet to happen. And I think that's a really important lens to take as we think about what framework will best suit our economy. So when I think about what a framework for India in ESG needs to achieve, first, of course, it needs to guide companies, both young and old and of all sizes. It needs to guide them to make sustainable choices. because it's only when they make those choices that we get the outcomes that we seek, especially in terms of usage of renewable energy or lowering of waste, etc., right? And then apart from guidance, we are looking for, of course, financing, because this transition has to be adequately financed, whether it is switching over to new technologies like EVs. Zomato has a net zero target of achieving net zero by 2033, which is a very aggressive target, but that's largely because 90% plus of our emissions sit in scope 3 downstream emissions, and we are convinced that by embracing EV technology, and we're hoping to be 100% EV based by 2030, we will get there sooner than more maybe traditional companies. But to drive that financing, our disclosures, the frameworks have to support that as well. And when you look at these two roles of a framework, in terms of guiding companies and in terms of attracting financing, there are a few, I would say, shortcomings that must be urgently addressed if we are to really leverage this moment in time when we have a young population, a young set of companies, and actually technologies to choose from, right? We didn't have some of these technologies that we're talking about today even 10 years ago. So if we're to really do justice to the moment that we are all at, a moment when India is also embracing the position of a leader for other nations, then what we need to do is first, we must get rid of any embedded assumptions in the framework itself. And as you know, having gone through this process now for 2 years, there are too many embedded assumptions. The first being the level of control that companies actually have. Most companies born today will not even have their own offices. Zomato does not own a single office, a single warehouse, a single store, or a single bike. We do not own anything. There is no need in today's business model to own anything. And yet, we are a huge enterprise that's in the top 50 listed companies in India. How did that happen if we don't own a single thing? Right? So this assumption of control over facilities and vehicles and fuel sources, that has to go. And we have to assume that there will be considerable amount of effort in influencing value chain. The second is that all issues are equally important for all companies of all sectors. That has to go. Today, India's economy is powered more than 50% by services. Services account for 30% of employment. And the fact is that it doesn't matter whether we measure the water used for domestic flushing in our retail, in our dark stores in Blinkit. What matters is, are we driving inclusion? Are we enabling onboarding of physically disabled people or persons with disability in our value chain? Because we also engage 15,000 contract workers in our warehouses and dark stores, right? So I think that there has to be attention paid to what's important. And then the other assumption that has to go is an assumption around a knowledge residing within every single company. That isn't true. Companies that are young tend to have a lot of generalists, right? You wear many hats. As a CSO at Zomato, I drive elements of diversity in the value chain. I drive some parts of the corporate diversity agenda. I manage the entire plastic waste initiative. I also support EV partnerships. And the range of things that people do at younger companies means that we won't have a technical specialist on renewable energy available to call upon for our power needs, right? And perhaps some of those specialists don't even exist in accessible form for a lot of smaller companies or younger companies. So I think that there is a knowledge gap, and that gap will take time to close. And we must be conscious of the fact that companies will need some time to fill that, to close that gap. And the last is really that the data is sitting somewhere in the company. It's all about compiling it. That's not true at all. Some of this may need to be measured for the first time. Elaborate measurement systems may need to be created. And I think that those of you in this room that are thinking of solving the problem through technology, while it's a very attractive idea, it's also a bit far from the reality of a lot of companies. A lot of companies don't have very sophisticated procurement systems on top of which you can just use some APIs and draw out the data that's required, right? Many companies will still need to organize their procurement systems in order for it to be effectively digitized. So I think there are some embedded assumptions that really need to go, and we do need to emphasize what is important, what are we trying to achieve here. For frameworks to be very helpful. Like, I'm very keen that every single person who needs to get access to finance to be able to get an EV for their own and commercial use should be able to do so. Today, most of my delivery partners are not creditworthy and do not enjoy that kind of access to finance. But is the framework helping me in any way highlight this issue to people? So I think that the goals of sustainability and the role of the framework need to be better aligned for this to be a really powerful mechanism to drive India's sustainability agenda.
Thank you, Anjali. I think that gives a very good perspective of the young company, that I think the framework has to be core to your business. And I think what we are following is some dictated models which are coming, but we have to have our own framework as well. Let's move to Dr. Ashok Menon now from SABIC for his perspective on what's your outlook on harmonizing these global standards, and where do you feel in your company experience we are heading to? So over to you, Ashok ji.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the kind introduction. Very good morning to all of you. Reporting, the way I look at it, is when we ask a student to go and write an exam, it can be equated to that. If a student understands everything, he has done all the work, it's easy for him to understand the question paper and write the exams. Of course, you need to be equipped with a lot of resources on that. Reporting is no different in this context. And before going into details, let me step back and just introduce where I come from. So I'm a part of SABIC. SABIC is a petrochemical company headquartered in Saudi Arabia, but has global footprints ranging from US, Europe, China, India, and also various parts of Asia. What we have in India is a technology center which houses the Sustainability Impact Assessment Center of Excellence, where we look at all the product processes and services that SABIC provide to the globally. What's the impact? We need to measure it to kind of improve it. That's what we do at Bangalore Center. Now, when we start looking at sustainability from a reporting angle, and this place was also driving sustainability reporting till last year. We then passed it on to the financial department since we matured from sustainable reporting to integrated reporting. And I also talk about how that transition and why was it important to do that kind of a transition. Now, we heard in the previous panel from the eminent speakers most of the actions around these decarbonizations and the efforts. Where is this coming from, right? So first thing when we look at reporting, the basic fundamentals is, or any organization adopting sustainability is, what's your company priorities? And that comes from a topic called materiality. Now we need to do the actions of materiality, a material assessment. And now it has matured to double materiality, because what's happening is sustainability in a big way is getting linked to financials. The way I define sustainability, you need to have a balance of social, economical, and environmental attribute. And sustainability when we look at defining the priorities, materiality comes into picture. Double materiality takes financial attributes, and the materiality has all the E, S, and G attributes built into it. That's what you decide based on materialities. What are your priorities that need to work on? Decarbonization strategy comes from that. SABIC being intensive in emissions, we have scope 1 and scope 2 put together around 55 million tons. Automatically decarbonization comes into our picture. So within decarbonization, you need to set a roadmap. And you need to disclose what's the roadmap associated with it. In case of SABIC, similar to what you heard with earlier speakers, we have five pillars when it comes to decarbonization. Starting from energy efficiency, moving up to onboarding renewable energy. We make chemicals. The biggest emitter within a chemical industry is our crackers. And one way of decarbonizing cracker is electrifying that. So that becomes a part of your strategy. And then you are looking at, we heard about carbon. We emit a lot of carbon. We have been successful in capturing this carbon and converting them into chemicals. Capturing carbon, purifying and converting them into methanol, which is used for myriad, right from pharmaceutical to petrol additives to various other building blocks of various chemicals. And then onboarding hydrogen. You need to disclose this part of it. Now, when we talk about disclosures are being set by different countries. You have Europe setting up disclosures. You have disclosures in terms of CSRD coming as ESRS. IFRS is setting up disclosures through ISB. ISB is the standard that is being developed, International Sustainability Standard Board. You have US developing, we have BRSR, we kind of heard about that. Philosophically, if you carefully look at it, they all depend upon same attributes. What is your spirit in which you are taking actions and what you are reporting? And these needs to be kind of brought out. Now, there are challenges in this kind of thing. When I start to report my disclosures, I need to have data available with me. And then whatever I report, I need to ensure that this is validated by a third party for establishing my credibility. Which means to say, and we are moving in reporting from what's called as limited assurance to reasonable assurance. How are we going to do that? So it becomes important to start onboarding automation programs in place where you are able to collect the data, you are able to on a quarterly basis understand where is your needle, is it going up or going down, and having an explanation for that. It doesn't always mean you will be always in the right direction, but having an explanation why you are doing what you are doing, why it has happened, what has happened. And then you kind of start having this automation and starting to look at deriving this data and sharing with the external. Again, actions when I speak about coming from a polymer industry or plastic industry, plastic pollution is one of the challenges world are facing. We have onboarded program around circular economy. We are taking plastics back into which have been wasted back, developing technologies which we can reuse plastics, may it be mechanical recycling, chemical recycling, and talking about this to the external world as a responsible company, and each actions that we are doing is able to generate revenue. Now in India, for example, we have developed a technology which can take your PET bottles back and convert them or upscale them into PBT, which has a higher molecular weight, higher properties, and start now this bottle can start going into electronic applications and even automotive applications, which is generating much higher revenue. And we are partnered with companies in India. I would call it a startup, but companies in India, giving them the technology. Millions of bottles have been kind of converted into useful product. Even these products have won award. Example, L'Oreal, the company which is into personal care, they are converting these bottles using this recycled materials as bristle for their makeup. Now you can imagine the profit a personal care industry makes. So that's the kind of revenue you could kind of generate and talk about it as a company which is innovating. How are we doing? So most of these are built into it, but there are challenges. For example, we make products. All our customers would like to have low carbon products. This is where the challenge comes in. There is no single, I would say, standard which can establish carbon neutrality of low carbon products. There are hundreds of standards that are there. Hundreds of companies who evaluate you in your low carbon. There are hundreds of companies who assure you on that. So choosing the right one becomes a challenge. Big watch company recently or a brand company ran into greenwashing problems because the certifiers withdrew their certification. Most of these are private agency, and that is where the challenge comes into picture when we are driving this entire agenda. But having said this, end of the day, not just E, from S and G part of it also, like India is pretty advanced in social, probably the only country in the world which has implemented CSR. Like 2% of your profit needs to be devoted to CSR, and nobody has that. That talks about the social advancement in terms of the way we are looking at it. And we are responsible, we kind of, for example, in our organization, we contribute to CSR activity. Our R&D center is located in a village. There are lots of schools. We figured out that there are no girls in those schools because there are no girls' toilets. So how do you identify a proper area for you to spend CSR activities, and all of a sudden when you started kind of building toilets for the girl, you started seeing girl students coming into the class. A small thing, but a huge impact that is getting created. But that's the opportunity which India provides you, and taking that and disclosing that to share that you are kind of somebody who are extremely responsible in the way you are driving this agenda. So the way we have done, we operate in Europe, we understand the European needs that are kind of coming up, we are positioning ourselves. There are challenges because at a granular level, you need to ensure you are not duplicating the work. So we have a repository of how do you extract information, a data center of our internally we have harmonized all the structure, right from GRI to TCFD. TCFD is another important attribute. Again, when I say reporting should not be taken as a burden, TCFD is a great example here. TCFD is Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosure. It tells you what are the risks and opportunities you have with respect to your product, processes and services in different geographies. I know in this different geography, based upon the TCFD analysis, this product will no longer be viable or cannot sell it because of the regulations coming up. I need to withdraw that. I also see what are the products. Let's say there is a low carbon product which has more opportunity in that region. I can make changes to my processes, putting solar or trying to drive hydrogen to get my carbon footprint down to drive that. I don't need to disclose my entire strategy to the world because I can put my competitive advantage at risk, but I can tell the world internally doing a TCFD analysis helps me understand my risk, my opportunity, establish a strategy, and the essence of that can be disclosed out the way I would like to do that. So I think these are some of the advantages that we have seen. Reporting is not a burden, it is an advantage, helping internal strategy, profitability, and positioning in a way which will make you kind of also look good and responsible, more importantly.
Thank you. That was a long description, but yes, got the core part of it, that how we can integrate into framework internally and then apply the best practices. Let's move to the last panelist. Over to you, Vignesh, and I think let's learn from the global value chain. What's your thought process on the harmonization? And if we can, the last one between us and the next panel, so the time management a little bit. Yeah,
thank you, Shikhar, for the additional pressure. So I think if companies like Zomato needs introduction, Synthite it certainly does. Yes. We are largely an industrial company. We are a B2B company, and we are around for 50 years, headquartered in Kerala. I'm pretty sure that we touch the lives of many of you out there. So, for example, if you have consumed anything other than salt and sugar, there's a good chance that Synthite is in the value chain that you consume. So we're largely a food manufacturing company, sits in the value chain. Likewise, on the fragrance side, if you've used any top brands, so we are there in the value chain. So we are in the first third of the entire value chain, where we directly consume the produce from the growers, and we supply to, eventually our products find its way to the consumers through very large reputed brands. So we are a private company, and there's no compliance or regulations that actually led to our sustainability journey. But just the realization that if we were to survive for the next 50 years, we have to do business differently and responsibly. And we are also largely an export-oriented company, and therefore, we have, there's not one market bias, but predominantly the North American and European continents is where most of the products go. So those global regulations and how the customers perceive us and how they are impacted by these regulations, they make a huge impact in our business. And likewise, we also have a fairly strong domestic market, and obviously an Indian headquartered company with global presence, BRSR and its core will ultimately find its way to us. So in terms of reporting frameworks, what I want to talk about is how the various frameworks is a daunting task for companies like us who are actually on the voluntary journey of disclosures and making our reporting robust. Obviously, there's the issue of survival, of ensuring that the business remains transparent enough that the consumers and our ultimate customers are able to leverage the data from us. But what we need to understand is our upstream is extremely complicated. We are largely sourcing from the unorganized sector. We deal with thousands of growers, and we also deal with imports from various countries, including Africa and Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and so forth. So considering all this, our scope 3 and value chain becomes extremely important. But what we have started doing is we have recognized the internal changes where we can deliver. For example, we're actively participating in a lot of certification programs where we are identifying certain products where there is complete backward integration, where we can control the value chain and all the way into how these products are deployed. Using this as some of the examples where we can start with. And slowly the unorganized sector, we need to, by the time we actually complete for a large part of our product portfolio, it's going to be a long, long time. But eventually we are relying on these frameworks to give us the guidance in terms of which are the key areas to focus and effectively disclose on. So for example, in our case, we started with GRI like with most companies, and we have obviously the larger end of the maturity curve will be to have an integrated reporting. If you look at some other frameworks such as IFRS, I think it's a welcome move, but it's very heavily financial biased. But what I feel is for companies like us, which is in the manufacturing space, which has effective regulations around food and that's food safety and so forth. So there's a lot of social factors, especially on health and safety and how we treat our agriculture growers, how the value chain ensures that the growers are making it sustainable for the social, and how our products remain sustainable for the consumers. These are all elements of social that's very important. So what we feel is a combination of BRSR, GRI, and effectively a TCFD, ultimately moving towards integrated reporting will serve us good in the long run. Whether or not regulations and compliance is a requirement for us, that's the direction we are willing to take.
Thank you. And I think I should thank you twice because of the time management part also. That saves me from last 2 minutes that I need to just wrap up the session. I think what the crux is coming out from all the 5 diverse panelists over here is that every company is unique. We have services, we have rating companies, bank, young companies, SEBEC, Synthite. I think what is emerging out over here very clearly is that one, companies need to have their own internal ESG framework, which they can look into, and that can be blended with what their market need and their customer need is, and how they want to give weightages to environmental aspects and the social aspects and the value chain aspects, because the business model are different for different organizations. And I think that's the message that we have to give to both the regulators locally and globally, that it can't be a prescriptive model. It has to be built up where there is a flexibility around what is material or double materiality for the organization, and the customer or the key stakeholders of that particular product or service has a trust on that brand or the product or the service, and they are seeing that in the long term this is going to serve us better. And I think those what we have heard, the model of circularity and all that is getting built up. So I think the future harmonization also need to evolve, and India can participate a lot, and we can share more good practices that how this circularity part and various aspects could be built it on it. And I think this is what within CII also we are trying to do. And I think learning from the previous experience and now what we are trying to do, and I think my colleague will help me with just a minute of video because we have very less time which is left for the question and answers. But what we have tried to do within CII is learning of all the corporates, that how they are following towards ESG. We have tried to build up this into a tool, which is a very sort of an simple analytical tool that we have applied for. And I think we have just a minute video because this is something that we have worked in, and we intend to launch it also as a ESG subscription service so that companies can make their own framework, can learn from various other international frameworks. So if we can just sort of start it, and that's it. Yeah. Thank you, team. And I think that's the launch of this particular service. We have no time left. I'm sorry to the audience for the question and answers, but let me request all the audience to applaud our panelists who have brought in good thoughts for us on how we can improve our journey on ESG. And but I will restrict that question should be asked in person during the lunchtime and the follow-up breaks. Sorry about not taking the questions, and I thank my panelists as well. Thank you. Thank you all.
I kindly request all our speakers to gather for a group photograph. Thank you. Also, to access all summit-related information, please scan the QR code available on your badges. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we now begin the session on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. The session will explore the role of IoT, predictive analytics, and smart controls in optimizing HVAC systems to reduce energy consumption and emissions. These digital innovations are key to achieve India's net zero 2070 goal, in line with the summit's overarching theme of driving sustainability change in an urbanizing world. It's my privilege to welcome our esteemed panelist and moderator to the stage. So please. I now invite Mr. Manjunath, Head Service Modernization and Lifecycle Solutions, Carrier India, to kindly lead the discussion. Thank you.
Good to start. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Right. So, we're going to start this panel discussion on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. It's from a HVAC perspective. So, since it's slightly different from what we have witnessed in the morning, so I have a context-setting presentation. That's probably going to take about 10, 12 minutes or max 15 minutes. And then we'll invite the panelists. I'll introduce the panelists now. And then we will have the panel discussion discussing about the impact of digital lifecycle solutions. So firstly, thank you CII for giving us this opportunity today. I'll introduce myself. I've already been introduced. Name is Manjunath. I head the lifecycle solutions vertical and the modernization vertical for Carrier. I have about 23 years of work experience. I've done IGBC, USGBC lead accreditation, and I've been in the sustainability field for a fairly long time now, for about 2 decades. Let me introduce the panelists. Can we have the screen? Yeah, it's come up. We have Namrata Rana. Namrata Rana comes with 28 years of experience in the areas of sustainability and ESG strategy. She has worked on transformation strategies for India's top 200 companies, as well as created green business models for clients. Namrata also has extensive experience in helping clients on the adoption of net zero principles in their value chain. She has worked on assignments in sectors such as manufacturing, transportation, steel, cement, insurance, fashion, retail, healthcare, mobility, food, hospitality, and green jobs. And also, Namrata has co-authored a couple of books titled Balance, Responsible Business, Shift. I think should welcome her with a round of applause. Namrata, thank you for being here. So the next panelist is going to be Anand Sekhar, SABIC. Anand works for SABIC, obviously. Anand Sekhar has been with SABIC's sustainability program since 2009 and currently leads the global lifecycle assessment LCA of SABIC products, including certifications and product declarations. His LCA expertise covers various sectors and has been involved in strategic circular economy and climate programs. Sekhar also contributes to industry standards and guidelines and is a key player in the PCF automation project to automate carbon footprint calculations for SABIC products. He holds an advanced degree in chemical engineering from Mississippi State University. If we can welcome him with a round of applause, people. Thanks. The next panelist is obviously Dheeraj Wadhwa. Dheeraj Wadhwa is Director, Commercial and Overseas Business, works for Carrier Corporation. He joined Carrier in 2005. He has managed increasing responsibilities over the long tenure, which includes leading, growing, and consolidating HVAC businesses for the India region. A mechanical engineer by qualification with a postgraduate diploma in business management, he carries an industry experience of over 20 years. He covers both the India and the overseas portfolio. So with that introduction, I will move into the context setting. This is slightly important because I think it's a slightly different subject. I'm going to talk about the HVAC perspective on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. I'll try and explain as to why that is more relevant for today's context. I have also got a disclaimer right up front. Okay, I mean, there's some slides which I call them as hygiene slides because you would have seen them, you would have actually known probably more, better than what I'm going to explain it. But from the context of this panel discussion, I think they're relevant slides. So kindly bear with me. I'm going to go through them real quick. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, buildings contribute, about 40% of energy-related GHG emissions are attributed to buildings. And in buildings, if you see really, 50% of the energy consumption is attributed to HVAC. So, but there's good news. Then the good news is, if you're looking at emissions from certified green buildings, up to 30% emissions can be reduced in smart buildings. Now, when I say smart buildings are those buildings which have got there are about 25 different asset categories that gets into a building. And if the assets are smart, if the assets are able to communicate to the IoT platform seamlessly, or if you have a building management system in a building, so then the digitally enabled lifecycle solutions is going to be a possibility. In the last couple of years, the industry that I represent, the HVAC industry, has made sure that any asset that gets out of the factory premise is digitally enabled. It's basically able to seamlessly communicate to the IoT platform, making the digitally enabled lifecycle solutions possible. Now let's look at it. I mentioned earlier, there are some hygiene slides, kindly bear with me. So the conversations around climate change, the extreme weather events that we are witnessing currently is actually on account of a 1.1 degree raise in the global average temperatures. So when I say this, from the pre-industrial era. So when did the pre-industrial era start? It started in the 1700s. But do we have written records of what the temperature back then was? No. 1850 onwards, I think we have been trying to capture the global average temperatures. And to say, I think it'll be fair to say that the global average temperature increase of 1.1 that we are witnessing right now is from the 19th century to the 20th century. That's the temperature difference that we are seeing. And apparently 2023 happened to be the warmest year, recorded at 1.36 degrees centigrade raise in the global average temperature compared to the pre-industrial era. And in the last 40 years, the average has been only rising. So just to kind of give a background of why this 1.1 is important, let's look at what happens if we restrict it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. There's going to be 41% increase in area burned by wildfires in average Mediterranean summer. Look at 2 degrees centigrade, it's going to increase to 62%, and at 3 degrees centigrade, increase in area burned by wildfires in average Mediterranean summer to about 97%. So this temperature, the global average, temperatures are extremely important. So why? That's basically because I think the world is coming together, obviously, to kind of make sure that we don't have these extreme weather events. However, what is relevant for us, for the context of this presentation as well, is the SBTi guidelines that came in. So basically, it's after the Paris Agreement, which happened in 2015, that we said 195 member countries signed up to limit the global temperature rise well within 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. So that's a very important COP meeting that happened and very relevant for companies like ourselves. And then the SBTi guidelines comes in for companies to adopt. So the SBTi pathway to becoming net zero, about 92% of the companies and organizations follow this pathway. So there are basically 3 aspects to this. One is the reporting, the annual reporting. Then you have a short-term goal and a long-term goal. Companies like Carrier, we have, it's not just Carrier. That's a brand neutral presentation. Basically, across the HVAC portfolio, if you see, a lot of these companies have said that we will be, setting near and long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction goals in line with the science-based targets initiatives to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So there are a lot of companies there, and we're going to become net zero by 2050. And by 2030, we're going to become carbon neutral. We also said that we will work towards helping our customers reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 1 gigaton by 2030. So I'll tell you why that is a major goal for HVAC companies. But before that, quickly running through the different emission buckets. We have got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, burn, by, and beyond emissions, direct and indirect emissions, classified in different ways. So in terms of direct emissions, from a HVAC perspective, if there is a gas leakage from a customer premise, and let's say the gas has a global warming potential, take the example of R134A, it's got a global warming potential of 1290. And if about 1,000 kgs of gas escapes from a customer premise, multiply that by 1290, and that's the kind of global emissions that we are attributed to, in terms of the HVAC equipment alone. Look at value chain emissions and indirect emissions. Obviously, the emissions on account of HVAC is for tropical climates is anywhere between 22 to 25%. I'm not talking about embodied emissions, these are the operational emissions, right? So there's a very significant chunk of emissions coming out of HVAC. So it's extremely important for us to work on the scope 2 emissions for our customers. Like, having said that, HVAC companies are now interested in working with their customers to help and reduce their emissions by about 1 gigaton. So now if you look at value chain emissions are indirect emissions, both upstream and downstream. We've heard about a lot of scope 3 emissions, but the numbers that I'm going to present next about HVAC companies' scope 3 emissions is going to be phenomenal. So there is upstream coming from supply chain, and there is downstream, which is actually going to our customers. That's the scope 3 emission. Now let's look at this. For a HVAC company, you'll realize that scope 1 emissions is 0.07% of the total emissions. Scope 2 is 0.07% again. Scope 3 is about 99.86% of a HVAC company's emissions. So given that, if you do a further Pareto analysis and see where are the emissions really coming from, is it upstream or downstream, you'll find that 8% of those emissions, so the scope 3 emissions are upstream, which is actually the supply chain emissions. And about 91% of that is actually an account of the products and solutions HVAC companies' customers would use. So that's a very significant number lying there. As far as the upstream emissions are concerned, many HVAC companies today have said that they're going to, because, for example, take the example of Carrier, we've got more than 54 manufacturing facilities spread across the globe. So if you have to really kind of look at their emissions, it's practically impossible for us to do embodied emissions. So what we do is we put them on a platform called EcoVadis. On the EcoVadis platform, about 80% of what we source goes through this check, and then we are fairly sure that they follow the compliances that are required from an ESG perspective. But downstream, so how are we going to do it? Now, downstream is actually the emissions on account of our products and solutions being with our customers. So that's how the ESG goal that we have taken for ourselves, one key element is that we will work with our customers and help them reduce their emissions by 1 gigaton before 2030. So that's the goal that we have taken. This is the goal that was taken at the beginning of the decade, but in COP28 and 29, we have said that why restrict ourselves to 1 gigaton? We will probably look at doing more than that, maybe 30 gigatons, from 2030 to 2050. So just changing gears quickly, in the context of this presentation, there are net zero roadmaps, and there are broadly 3 of them, which is carbon offset, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. If you look at the 3 major pathways and their impact on a company's net zero goals, you'll find that the carbon offset method has a very low impact. It's business as usual. So you have emissions, you set it off by taking carbon credits. Renewable energy is good. It's got an impact of about 10 to 15% in terms of helping a customer, a user, to achieve their net zero goals. But that's got certain limitations of its own. You got only so much space for you to set up maybe a renewable solar panel and wind energy. And also the element that, you have to pay wheeling charges from the source to the supply. I think you have wheeling charges coming in the way. But whereas energy efficiency, given that from a HVAC perspective, there are about 22% GHG emissions involved there, about 50 to 80% of clients' net zero goals can be achieved through this. Not just energy efficiency, energy efficiency can be improved by using digital products where we have AI and IoT playing a very important role. I'll just quickly run through a slide in which we're trying to see what are the different solutions that can make a building more, more eco-friendly, more, less of carbon emissions coming out of that. So there are modernization solutions, there are upgrade solutions, BMS solutions, digital solutions, and OpEx solutions a HVAC company typically offers today. And all of that is actually very, very important, very relevant, because I'm just going back one slide. For a building which is expected to last for about 100 to 125 years, any HVAC asset, for that matter, any of the 25 asset categories that gets into a building is expected to last anywhere between 15 to 17 years. So following a straight line depreciation method, that asset is actually off your books within the next 5 to 6 years. So, but when you go for a retrofit, the 100% IRR that's coming out is actually with an energy efficiency retrofit. Where we have energy conservation measures, you go do an energy audit and come back and have a list of 10, 12 energy conservation measures and then implement them. It's got 100% IR. Trust me when I say this, we've met a lot of customers and they've realized that this is possibly the best way. The energy efficiency method is the best way to kind of get to the net zero goals. And in a building, I'm not spending too much time here. Any building, there are ample opportunities, a lot of opportunities for us to actually get into a building and work with them on the, carbon emission reduction goals. Quickly on the IoT platform, so what are the various things that can actually come in? So there is healthy air, which is actually, building wellness has become a very, very important aspect. You've got IoT sensors coming in, with 10 different parameters. It could be PM 2.5, PM10, CO2, CO, radon, a lot of VOCs and everything that can actually get into a, in a very hazardous manner for a building operation can now be captured and monitored on a continuous basis. Deploy a sensor for maybe 2,500 to 3,500 square feet area, and then I think the data is available on the cloud for people to access. And with the algorithms written over there, it's easy to kind of monitor a building and say whether it's good or bad. So likewise, occupant assistant, you don't have to kind of kick on the lighting management system or the air con, basically, without having load there. So you have an occupant assistance system which counts the number of people inside a building and then help reduce energy there. Net zero management tool. So net zero management, many speakers before this, have spoken about the BRSR requirement and then BRSR. With the net zero management tool, it should be so helpful, so easy that you just click on a button on a sustainability report. I think you should have the BRSR report coming in. Scope 1 and 2 are basically easy, but scope 3, the customer has to define. So this is possible. The HVAC performance analytics, and the predictive insights, this is a very, very important element. Now today, when a HVAC asset is deployed at a customer site, and we are flowing data continuously to the IoT platform, the algorithms that are built on the cloud platform is capable of saying what can happen on an asset 6 to 8 weeks ahead of its actual instance. It's monitoring many parameters. The machine learning is obviously happening there. Even before the asset is is likely to fail, we're able to predict that and then make sure that that failure doesn't happen. Now, how does it help? I think that I've tried to kind of correlate through the impact an HVAC company has on the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions of a client who are taking services from a HVAC company. On scope 1 direct emissions, if you're able to predict well in advance that the gas leakage is likely to happen in a particular premise, we clearly know that we can go and prevent that. So that GWP multiplied by so many kgs of gas disposed to the atmosphere is taken care of through predictive insights by taking the data to the IoT platform. Scope 2, I need not speak. I've already said that 22% of operational emissions are already taken care because the HVAC companies are working really hard to make sure that the assets are optimized. And the other thing is we also bring in predictive, the edge AI. Basically, it takes into account all the operating parameters and makes sure that the system is working at its most energy efficient set point. And the third one, I think scope 3 emissions. For a client, the scope 3 emission actually is a HVAC technician going from their office to the site and servicing it. So look at the tailpipe emissions. Multiply any distance is 25 kilometers, the carbon factor. So that's a scope 3 emission that we are able to reduce by bringing in IoT technology, by doing digital warranty, by also being able to kind of estimate what are the number of parts that are required and take those parts along with you before you go and actually land up at the customer site, servicing them. So that's clearly what I wanted to set the context as. But the last one, the more important one is, it's known, it's pretty clear that there is a ESG intersection between the HVAC companies and the clients that we work with. Right? There's a clear intersection because 91% of the emissions coming out of a HVAC company is actually on account of customers. So HVAC companies working with the customers, with the clients to ensure that their carbon emissions are reduced is a classic intersection that I wanted to kind of explain. So what really happens is understanding a client's ESG requirements, aligning the offerings, and then making commitments would be the ideal path forward. So with that, I'll end the context setting. I know it's been a long context setting, but then I go back, take my seat, and then we have perspectives from the panelists. So can we close this? Sure. So this is a question to all the panelists. So the HVAC industry is embracing digital solutions to enhance lifecycle management and sustainability. From your unique perspective, whether it's sustainability, manufacturing, or ESG, how have these solutions impacted the HVAC sector in terms of efficiency, environmental sustainability, and operational effectiveness? So I'll hand it to Namrata for your perspective on this. Feel free, I think you can explain the other aspects of ESG because I've tried to kind of cover mostly on the HVAC side of it. Over to you, thanks.
So I'd like to first begin by saying that that was such an interesting way of saying that, almost everything that we do around us actually leads to so many emissions. And if you think innovatively, there are different ways in which we can create positive ecosystems to reduce emissions. So thank you for that, Manjunath. That was really exciting and interesting. I just want to say that almost everything around us is changing. So the way we grow things, the way we manufacture things, the way we ship things around, all that is going to change very soon because of the increased focus on emissions. That fundamentally means that we need to create more and more such ecosystems where we say that the emissions around the products that we consume, the way we live our lives, need to actually reduce. Now, that's not an easy task, because a lot of things that we see around us, including this hall that we are sitting in, have been created using materials that are not biodegradable, that have embodied carbon emissions in them, and also are not very easy to reuse or recycle. That means that every single product, every single thing that we use, at least mostly, needs to be either redesigned or we need to look at new materials that we are using. And in parallel, we need to keep track of the data that will tell us where we are on this journey to reduce carbon emissions and to create a greener, more inclusive world. And I also want to link this up to our Viksit Bharat story. The government of India is very keen to convert India into a developed country. A developed nation is critical to us because it will, take us on the path to growth, move millions out of poverty. But at the same time, this growth, this movement towards Viksit Bharat cannot be without environmental consciousness. It cannot be without green growth. It cannot be without inclusion. Again, as a parallel track to that, we need, therefore, technology. While we have technology that measures, the financial aspects of the world around us, we don't really have an India stack for sustainability, and that's something that we need to think about. We have a payments ecosystem, so every minute, every day, we know the digital payments that are happening in our country. We know the financials of all companies on a daily, quarterly, monthly, annual basis. But we don't know how much waste is being generated in our country, what our carbon emissions are, how much water is being used, and where we stand on our net zero journey. We can measure the energy consumption, yes, we have metering systems, but there's way, way more to sustainability than that. So I'd just like to say that, the journey has started, but there's way more to be done in terms of moving towards green growth and an enabling ecosystem that can actually help us.
Thank you, Namrata, for that. Anand Shekhar, your perspective, please.
Thank you. There's a convenience of, building on a lot of, great remarks. So I will greatly benefit from it already. Before I actually share from the industry where I come in, Ashok has already introduced Sabik in the room. I wanted to start from, the context of HVAC and some of the dichotomies that we actually see, right? Like one of the aspects is, as a country with, air conditioning growing, there is a context of luxury, attached to it, but then, it is even seen as a survival aspect. So when you're growing to maybe 9-10 times the size that you have as air conditioning today, how much of that has to also cater to the survival needs, like in places like Delhi where you have like heat waves and, people struggling to survive. And there's also an interesting, dichotomy in, growth and decarbonization, right? We have to grow and, as a country with, larger demands, etc. But you are also dealing with decarbonization, coupled to it. So that's an interesting dichotomy to solve as well. The third aspect is, AI and the digital aspects that Manjunath introduced, and how, generally AI is seen as, maybe a direction of, taking away jobs, right? So how do you look at AI complementing jobs or making, livelihood and jobs, better? And some of the aspects from HVAC, which were also coming already in the slides of Manjunath, on how you can actually apply AI and digital solutions to improve, energy efficiency. Some of the reports that we were reading on this indicates that you already have, until 2030 to reduce energy efficiency, improve energy efficiency by up to, 40%. But you actually reach a certain point, right? But then when you are growing in size, it is not more with energy efficiency. It's much more to do with, system level problem solving. A lot of that, AI can help significantly in. And secondly, Manjunath mentioned about, one of the remarks on intersection, right? I would even take it further to call it like confluence. You have a lot of, AI actually, feeds on data, and it is not data of only HVAC systems that would actually solve for innovation. It's possibly
you need to have data on, the number of solar, PVs that you would have on the roofs. How much more do you need for the number of EVs that are growing in a certain neighborhood? And possibly if there are marginalized workers living in that neighborhood, how many of maybe community halls that are needed, which is not giving you the 25-degree luxury in an outside environment of 50, but possibly, like bringing the temperature down to, habitable levels for survival, right? So there's a lot of, like innovation in this space that can be aided by digitalization. And maybe that gives me a good segue to also bring some perspectives from the, the petrochemical industry where we belong, in SABIC, where Ashok, like brought in the views of disclosure needs in ESG, and what you have to tell the outside world about the actions that we are doing in sustainability as, like one aspect to it. The other angle is also, like how much of the data you need even for the marketplace, right? So there were also Namrata's remarks on system level, redesigning of products. Like one cue I can take from, HVAC systems is how you look at it from a life cycle point of view, right? So it's not about the energy that we consume in the refrigerators or air conditioners, but it's more about the emissions that happen, like to generate the energy. There is always a life cycle, like angle to it. A lot of data on carbon footprint is actually needed today in the marketplace, but even by regulatory authorities in certain parts of the world. And this means, like in SABIC, for instance, we have invested quite heavily in automating a lot of, like this, data generation, because it's about how closer you are to the true source of data, the data of the meterers and, like the CO2 emission stacks and etc. And how much of the data can be translated into, like calculating product carbon footprint. For instance, SABIC, like a few thousands of products, we need to offer this data to, like customers in the marketplace. So it's a clear space again, like where this whole confluence of, like sustainability, like digital transformations and, like growth of the industries is, providing a perfect, like place for innovation.
Thank you. Over to Dheeraj for your perspective.
Thank you, Anand, for your opinion. Of course, Namrata, it's an interesting way of looking at things, the way you explained it to us. But coming from the air conditioning background and the field, people look at us as if when it comes to carbon footprint increase in the world, we are probably the only culprits and should be hanged. So setting the context right, it's important for us to understand that how much of contribution does the HVAC world has towards this. So if you look at the energy Pareto for that matter, and we see that where does the energy get consumed? So there are broadly three basic segments where it gets consumed. The largest one happens to be the buildings. Buildings consume about 40% of the energy generated, followed by industries, which is about 30-odd%, and almost a similar number by the transportation field. So these are the three areas where the complete energy gets consumed. So when we focus only on buildings, probably we are looking at the larger chunk. Of course, industries also are there and transportation also is there. I'll touch upon that. But first important piece, inside the buildings, about again another 40% of energy gets consumed inside the buildings by HVAC systems. So about 16% is what is HVAC is contributing towards energy consumption inside a building. So that's the reality. Of course, industries will have a different Pareto and followed by transportation. And we see a lot of that in terms of the work being done in the industries. I was a part of one of the discussions in the US-India Business Council, and there was a lot of focus around how we can reduce the energy consumption inside the industries and contribute towards decarbonization. So there were a lot of good ideas coming from the industry who are even from the distribution side, generation side, user, everybody. And from the transportation side, the way we look at India today, of course, you got airports, you got railways, you got road transport, you got metros, you got developments like happening. We are talking about 400 airports running in next about 20 odd years is what I read a report a few days back. And we are talking about railway stations being developed under PPP model. We are getting metros in each and every city now. So that's the kind of development we are having, and each one of this application will have air conditioning. So that's the kind of contribution air conditioning will have. So it is significant, undoubtedly, and that puts another responsibility on us as manufacturers and distributors that what can we do towards this cause. So, there are ways and means. As an organization, we have a commitment towards becoming a net zero by 2050. It's a huge responsibility. Coming from an air conditioning organization, setting a goal for net zero globally is not easy task. So there we have set ourselves, and this will come through our solutions and services. Some bit of it, why I call solutions, is it's no longer a world which banks only on products. Today, the user asks that, can you have a better solution to reduce energy consumption? So we have to design our products in such a way that we give them an optimized energy solutions. Of course, the services is something which happens by way of digital tools. And here we step in with the investments we have done as an organization in the digital world where we can serve our customers better. The more data we can extract, the more information we can extract, we can use it for optimizing the energy consumptions. We can use that data to see that how can we do our operations better. In the last discussion on the panel on this dais itself, we heard almost all organizations are talking about reporting. So while they're reporting, they would also be interested in how can I optimize my operations? How can I optimize my reporting? How can I optimize my use? So that I can pull it down and contributes towards decarbonization. And here a lot of development has happened with respect to tools which can be used and put across as installed when you are deciding on your air conditioning systems. And that's how we are working towards our goal with our customers and users. So I hope I've been able to put my point across that we are not the only culprits.
Thanks, Dheeraj, for that. So now to more specific questions. We'll ask Namrata first. With India's commitment to sustainability and net zero by 2070, how do you see digitally enabled life cycle solutions? Although I put in my question HVAC, but generally contributing to national sustainability goals, what key policies or frameworks could further accelerate this transformation?
Thanks, Manjunath. So let's just divide the problem of net zero into some smaller segments, right? So if we just say that, India has a net zero target and we need to do many things to actually achieve it. One of the most important thing is the switch to renewable energy, right? But then the switch to renewable energy is something that is applicable and can be done by, almost all of us who are living in independent homes. But when it comes to societies, it becomes a challenge because it needs collective thinking. In factories, once again, there are a lot of industries that have actually moved to renewable energy, but there are others who are still on the road to actually switching. And there are some industries which are largely unorganized and it's not an easy pathway. On the other side, there is energy efficiency. Now, energy efficiency is again something that impacts all of us. So energy efficiency as a low-hanging fruit is possible, it's doable, and it's also an enabler in actually moving us to net zero in a faster way. So while we say that, and for that, when we start saying that what is my energy efficiency and where do I need to go, you need to create a baseline and you need to start actually mapping that on an ongoing basis. In that space, digital tools become very important, where we start saying that, we are able to capture data on an ongoing basis. Now, there are many other aspects as well. Say, for example, around waste, the quantity of waste that an organization generates, what do we do with it, and what is the life cycle of the products that you're manufacturing, and what happens after customer usage. So the waste ecosystem, once again, is a low-hanging fruit that can be handled, that needs to be done. And organizations today are faced with the extended producer responsibility regulations that the Indian government has brought in, which means that everybody needs to start looking at this very carefully and actively. It's also an area where a lot of innovation is lacking. So to my mind, if we actually digitally enable these two big areas, we will be able to make significant strides on our net zero goals.
Thanks for that, Namrata. On the digitally enabled solutions, I think we're going to quickly get to our net zero goals, India goals of 2070, being net zero by 2070. So I'm looking at Anand now. So, with India's sustainability and life cycle assessment, LCA focus, how do you see digitally enabled life cycle solutions supporting the circular economy and improving environmental outcomes?
Thank you, Manjunath, for the question. Again, I'm building on at least starting from remarks that Namrata made just, even if you look at circularity as one aspect, right? Like we look at product not from, where the product is being used, but also from, what it takes to produce the product, what it takes to dispose the end of life emissions. This already also brings a lot of, LCA angles to the subject, which is, early days in India, but, the rest of the world is, progressing quite a lot in this space, right? So from maybe the choice of a warmer blanket to, having to heat the whole room already is, one, angle to the subject, right? And it's also about what happens to these materials at the end of their life and what is the best thing to do with them. Some of them are probably better equipped for going all the way to what is called chemical recycling, while some others probably have design solutions to handle. So there is quite a lot of choice making to do, where we need to have the data on which of these choices gives you the lowest impacts, and that's really where the LCA thinking comes in. Also taking the cue from some of the data that like Manjunath's slides presented on HVAC itself, right, where you are looking at a lot of emissions that happen outside of your control in the value chain, right? It could be upstream and downstream. And this is purely the area where, LCA thrives, because you need to have the data. And this is also a very interesting space where in the recent 2-3 years, we have seen a lot of activity, especially for digital ecosystems. There's something called the data exchange platforms. So these data exchange platforms are being, recently mobilized. It is to ensure that value chain partners can share data on, product carbon footprint or, other LCA data, but, almost entirely digitally, right? Imagine companies like SABIC who are probably supplying materials to almost every possible industry. It becomes, quite critical for us to be having such digital platforms to, exchange data with a larger need of consumer base. It could also be, there are examples of, others than SABIC, even attempting concepts on blockchain, where when there is an increased emphasis for data sharing, it is not also always, one direction of the value chain, right? So there's data to be extracted even from your customers and data offered to customers, which means you can actually do a lot of that even on, more advanced systems like blockchain, where it's, more appropriate to do. So I think that's really where, going back to my earlier point, there's a confluence of, sustainability and digital ecosystems. They can influence and catalyze each other.
Thanks, Anand, for that response. Because see, as a manufacturer, as a product company, we find it extremely hard to get an LCA done, because we source it from diverse, locations, different countries, different geographies. So I think it's very important, digitizing it and then LCA, putting these two things together. I think we will achieve our net zero goals faster. Now, over to Dheeraj, from a manufacturer's perspective. So, digital lifecycle solutions, have they influenced product design, production processes, and after-sale services in the HVAC industry? Do you foresee lifecycle solutions becoming a mandatory part of product sales in India overall?
I will answer this in a little different way. I think we as a country have taken the first step now when it comes to a complete portfolio in the air conditioning segment. Are the decisions being made on the life cycle of any equipment or solution being provided? The answer is yes and no, because quite a few users are asking and making those decisions that way. But a larger part of the community, while they say, but the actual decisions are not made on that basis, this still goes by the capital cost only. So that's a little unfortunate. But having said that, as when I say first step has been taken, I'm actually very happy, and all of us should be proud of that, that till about 4 years back, we were using products basis certification either on HRI basis, which are American standards, or the Eurovent standards, which is Europe standards. But today, government has set up and laid down norms wherein we have standards on India environmental conditions. The tropical climate which we have here which is unparalleled, because we have got 9 different type of climates within the country itself, which is not the case with many other countries. So we have to find a way in which we look at our products basis our climate, not others' climate. So now we have standards, a labeling program, which helps us decide on the air conditioning systems, whether it are unitary products or central plants, on the basis of those star labeling, and we can pick up the product. But next step is, Is there any work being done around when we look at these services and solutions that we pick up them on the life cycle basis? It's something which is some distance away, but I think that the path is there in front of us. We have to move in that direction. We all can contribute towards that in our respective roles and responsibilities which we have today. So of course, as an organization, the products and the services now we are designing for last about, I can say, 7 to 8 years, because we already are and have been a solution-based organization even when we manufacture our products. So always when we go back to the user, whether it's an application of hotel, hospitality, healthcare, any other application, we always give an alternative solution which is more cost-effective, energy efficient, and of course makes sense in buying that in terms of a life cycle assessment being done around that solution. Now it depends on the user whether they want to take that call or not. So that's how I would like to end upon this point. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for that, Dheeraj. So we are running short on time. So this is a real fast one. To Namrata, is the digitization helping in the sustainability reporting? Like we heard about BRSR so much. So will digitization really take us there in terms of expediting the sustainability reporting, or will it help in terms of tracking it better? What's your perspective?
I think it will help in both. But companies need to chase down data. And the data problem is a very real one. Not just for within their premises, but scope 3 emissions, getting in suppliers on board. So the entire data problem around sustainability is a challenge. If we are able to solve that, we can certainly get to faster, more efficient reporting.
Okay, thank you. Anand, quickly to you. Will digitization help the LCA process and the circular economy path that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And maybe since we are heading towards lunch, I'll also make my responses short, right? As building on my earlier remarks, it's a perfect ecosystem with, with a large appetite for like data, and a large appetite for data to, offer to, data transparency and ESG reporting, exchanges in the marketplace, and, predictive intelligence like AI. So yeah, like I would say that almost all industries are about to, be perfectly, poised for getting into a journey of, sustainability and AI automation together.
Perfect. Thanks. Dheeraj, to you. In terms of IoT, AI, and data analytics, how have these innovations enhanced the sustainability and efficiency of HVAC systems and that you represent really?
You have spoken about energy efficiency almost on every questions which were discussed out here. I'll again put it in a very different way. We are not only efficient, we are not only becoming efficient with respect to energy. Each one of us sitting in this room have become more productive also. Imagine, you do everything on your phone today, whether it is healthcare, food, news, you pick up any other services, banking, anything and everything is there in your phone itself. You are able to address and answer everything in just a touch of few touches on the phone itself. And that's it. So when we become more productive, we are able to do the same work in lesser time, and we are able to focus on the core work which we are expected to do. And when we do that, our efficiency comes back in everything what we are doing today. So certainly IoT-based solutions, AI, everything is helping us as an individual, as a country, as a team, and as many organizations are adopting it very quickly.
Now I think this is more like a call to action. Some final thoughts from all the panelists, starting with Namrata. So what immediate actions should stakeholders, government, industry, and consumers take to accelerate the adoption of digital lifecycle solutions? And what role do ESG reporting and awareness play in this sustainable change? More from a perspective that we have, through this conversation, and at least emphasize that digitization and digital lifecycle solutions is important. So from that perspective, I think, what's your call for action?
I think the call for action is that we need a redesign of products and services. Once we actually start thinking long-term about the products and services, digitization will actually automatically come into that, and we will design for the future and not just for immediate consumption and waste in a linear system. We need to think long-term, circular systems and circular products.
Thank you. Anand?
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I think like building on the ones that already exist today, the further call for action is more about how we can create a data ecosystem that is actually beyond, like companies and industries, right? Because solving for the best answers in artificial intelligence means you need to have data beyond what you own yourself. And there's needs to be a little more like free flow of data, like to solve it as an ecosystem.
Yeah, Dheeraj, you're...
One point which I would like to add over here is that digital tools in air conditioning world are a reality. Industry has that solution available in every product line. As a user, whichever segment you are in, you must ask for it, you must adopt it, you must use it to the advantage of analytics for every possible aspect within that, so that you can contribute towards saving of energy, which contributes towards decarbonization. So adoption is the key word, because the technology exists today and is being used.
Yeah, so the final thoughts were the summary. So I'm not going to kind of summarize the conversation, the panelists, I think in their words, and and the call for action. I'll not be able to do justice to that. So with that, do we have time for maybe a couple of questions from the audience? If there are anybody wants to ask any question to the panelists? Yeah, see a hand raising there. Can somebody hand over the mic there?
Thank you. We discussed about HVAC manufacturing industry, as scope 3 is cooling gases is one of the major contributor for scope 3 CO2 emission. Now we spoke about R134A, which is having GWP of more than 1000 or 1200. So now there is a R32, which is the lowest GWP potential gas available, but it's very rare that manufacturers supply the HVAC in R32. So what are the challenges and how we can adopt such materials which is having lowest GWP, which is having 675 kgs per kg of cooling gas, which is almost 50% that we are using currently. So how we can adopt such materials which is having lowest GWP?
Good question.
What are the challenges?
Right, yeah. So I will start off and then maybe hand it to Dheeraj for maybe giving a more elaborate sort of response to that question. See, all gases are not suitable for all applications. Like you spoke about R32, which is a high GWP gas. Basically, it's got a GWP in excess of 600, and it may not be suitable for chiller applications. It could be probably used for light commercial or VRF applications. And also, R32 classification-wise is probably not the best. So what we have today got is actually a gas which has got 0 ODP and very close to 0 GWP. So those are the gases of the future. So since we have a large installed base of equipment that are using these gases, we have a drop-in refrigerant coming, and then I think eventually we will switch to some of these more eco-friendly gases, which has got 0 ODP and very low GWP. So Dheeraj, you want to add anything more to that?
You touched upon the right point. That gas is not suitable as of now, basis technology available for the larger chilled water systems. It is more into direct expansion type systems, and most of the organizations have already transitioned to R32. It's not that it's not available. It is available, transitioning is happening, and you will shortly see almost all the organization moving towards, more importantly, low GWP refrigerants, not just restricting to only one refrigerant. So we have those options available. It's only matter of time where the scale of economy helps us to transition completely into those refrigerants.
Okay, I've got a note saying that I've got time for just one last question. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question to the panelists? Okay. If there are none, then I think we'll conclude the panel discussion, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and thank the panelists. I think a lot of learning, and thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of this session. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists and moderator for sharing their valuable insight. May I kindly request all to for a group photograph? Thank you. May I kindly request all us, ladies and gentlemen, we now break for lunch. Please join us back by 1:30 as we have very special plenary featuring Bhupender Yadav, Honorable Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change as the chief guest. This session will take place in this hall. Also, air quality is displayed on the back screen, highlighting the difference in air quality inside and outside of this hall. Also, lunch is open in both halls, that is this hall and in the Sovereign Hall too. So I request everyone to please proceed for lunch. Thank you. Sure. Also requesting to please carry all your belongings as we need to set up the hall for the next session. Thank you.
आज ये मिशन लाइफ का ये विजन दुनिया के सामने रख रहा।
My dear Prakriti, remember what you have to do on Earth?
Yes, Mother. I will educate people with love so that they understand mission life and maintain the environmental balance by adopting environment-friendly lifestyle.
My child.